And welcome everybody to the tips and tricks for VMware Cloud and AWS, going over defending your cloud against advanced threats. I'm Zach Zumbaugh, Staff Customer Success Architect, the VMware Cloud and AWS team, joined by my colleague Fabio, who's also a CSA on the same team.
Hi guys, thanks for joining.
Next slide. So the agenda today, we're going to cover VPC Center Access, the gateway firewall, distributed firewall, identity firewall, the advanced firewall, and FQDN filtering. All right, next slide, please. So kind of where you want to start when you're trying to protect your environment against any threats is first you want to secure your VPC Center Access. So VPC Center by default in any new SDDC, or really all SDDCs, has a account called Cloud Admin at vmc.local. And this is the account you have to use initially when you're connecting and setting up your VPC Center Access. One thing you want to do initially is to change the password of this account, because when you log into your SDDC, anyone that's really like an org member with SDDC access can view this password. It's kind of hard-coded into the UI. But you can log in with this account and change the password. So then the password that shows up in the UI is not going to be valid for anyone to log in with. Secondly, you want to change your DNS resolution from public to private. So when you first deploy an SDDC, your VPC Center, the DNS will resolve to a public IP address, and this could potentially be used to access your VPC Center from the internet. So most people will be connecting to their SDDC with a VPN or a direct connect. So you don't really need to have it set for public. You just want to change it to private. If you don't have that type of connectivity into your SDDC, it'd be recommended to set up maybe something like an SSL VPN or a jump host, so you can log in that way, and then you can access your VPC Center with the private IP address. So you don't have any chance of someone potentially accessing your VPC Center over the internet if you leave it on the public resolution. Also, you want to configure Active Directory integration. So this kind of goes back to what I'm talking about this Cloud Admin account. So at first, you can only log in with the Cloud Admin. So you would log in with this account, configure your Active Directory access, and so then you can add users and groups from your existing Active Directory deployment in order to be able to log in. Now, you do want to keep in mind that the role with the most privileges is going to be this Cloud Admin role. So when you're creating new roles, custom roles, you always just want to start with this role, clone it, and then adjust the privileges in that fashion. If you clone other roles or try to use other roles to create new roles, you could run into issues because if any of the privileges aren't valid for your user, then the role is not going to work and you won't be able to log in with that account. So stick with the Cloud Admin role and clone that. And lastly, here we have kind of a little tip and a trick to get access to or to view the management resource pool and other management resources. So there's actually a local group called Cloud Admin Group. And you can see here there's a KB article that links, and it'll show you how to get access to this. So basically, this is a local group that you want to put probably any kind of service account. So let's say, for example, you're setting up vRealize operations and you have a service account set up that you want to use for that product. You'd want to stick that account into this cloud admin group, and this will give you read access to the management resource pool, which has all the management VMs like vCenter, NSXT. And this is really just so you can get a more accurate readings, more accurate metrics for resource usage in your SDDC. All right, next slide, please. So now we'll talk about configuring the gateway firewall. So your gateway firewall on the SDDC is really your first line of defense. Is the north-south firewall, and it's really broken out into two different firewalls. Essentially, there's one for the management gateway. It's called the management gateway, and that's rules for your management VMs. So inbound, outbound for vCenter, HCX, ESXi, SRM, NSX Manager. So really anything that's kind of automatically deployed in the environment you need to set up rules through the management gateway firewall. Then we also have the compute gateway. So this will apply to all of your compute workloads. So, once you create a new segment or any new segments and start, migrating workloads in, this firewall will apply to those workloads, and they're completely separate. So if you want to allow access between like management and compute, you'd want to set up the rules in each respective firewall there. So another thing is you want to configure your vCenter inbound access to restrict networks that can access vCenter. So you can have an any rule, so it basically allows any inbound onto vCenter, but you will get a steady stream of emails from automated emails from the service advising you to change that rule. So that'd be one of the first rules I would recommend setting up. And you could set that to whatever your internal network range is, or specific IPs. And so basically all the SDDC ingress and egress traffic goes through this gateway firewall, which is really kind of instantiated on the NSXT edge virtual machine. Okay, next slide, please. Thank you. Now we have the distributed firewall. So this is a more granular firewall that's also part of your VMC and AWS SDDC. And it actually operates at the virtual machine VNIC level. So it can control east-west traffic and north-south traffic. And it's evaluated before the gateway firewall for egress traffic and after the gateway firewall for ingress. So, you can just imagine, I have a diagram here on the next slide we'll look at here in a minute. But for now, you should consider this firewall, just think of it as a firewall for basically every individual VM, if you choose to configure it that way. The firewall cannot be used for the management components like vCenter or HCX. These are automatically excluded to prevent you from locking yourself out of the environment. So potentially you could, if like vCenter wasn't excluded, you could potentially set up a rule that would lock you out, and you really would be kind of locked out of the environment. So the distributed firewall allows you to implement micro segmentation. That's kind of what I was talking about, where you can really set up policies on a per VNIC basis. So when you set up your policies, you can base them on logical security groups. So the members can be virtual machine segments or hard-coded IP networks, and objects can belong to multiple security groups. So you just want to check the latest configuration maximums to determine any limits there on group numbers, rule numbers, things like that. They're pretty high, and typically with each new release, that scale increases, but you just want to check there first to make sure your plan is going to fit within the limits of the environment. Another thing on that is you can use security tags to define groups. So instead of like manually plugging in all your VMs or whatever VMs to a security group or segments, you can create security tags, tag the virtual machines, and then they're automatically added to the security group. So you don't have to manually go through groups and add them. You just apply a tag and the virtual machine is included into the security policy. And this is something that Fabio covered more in depth. I just wanted to mention it here. You can integrate Active Directory groups with the identity firewall. So you can actually create policies based on which users are logged into a virtual machine. And this is very beneficial in a VDI environment, especially if you, typically, different users can log into the same machines, or you're doing kind of like on-demand spinning up the VMs as users log in, so that you can, apply the policy based on which user is logged in there. So in short, distributed firewall, this allows for highly granular control of all network traffic in and out of your virtual machines, and it's highly flexible and performant. And that is operates at a layer 4 level support protocol. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, here's just kind of a basic diagram on what I just talked about in terms of firewalling. So if you look on the right here, you see your workloads are connected. In this example, there's 2 different networks. They're connected to the compute gateway. And you can see kind of where the top 2 VMs are grouped, and the bottom 2 are grouped, but then also left and right are in the same groups as well. So as I mentioned, you can belong to multiple groups. So in this case, the VMs on the left can communicate with the VMs on the right side, but the VMs on the left or right respectively can't communicate with each other. And then this top group can communicate with the vCenter or the management gateway. Okay, Fabio, on to you. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Doc. So, guys, so I will talk a little bit more about all the advanced features that we have released during last summer. So first of all, keep in mind that all the features that I will talk about need to be activated. So you will not find that already activated on your SDDC. That's because they are not free of charge. So they are pay-per-use. So feel free to reach your sales representative for any details about the price. So I will not cover that. But to just have all these functionalities, you have to go into your add-on tab and activate the NSX advanced firewalling feature, and that will allow you to have the identity firewall, IPS, IDS, and FQDN filtering. So that's just as an intro, because otherwise you will not be able to do nothing that I will show you now. So let's start with the identity firewall that was already mentioned by Zach. So next slide, please. I'm frozen. Okay. So with the identity firewall, as Zachary was already mentioning, you will be able to add just an external identity source like Active Directory or any LDAP just provider to your firewalling feature in VMware AWS. This will be mainly used for VDI and remote desktop feature. So while enabling this feature, this feature will be enabled on a cluster basis. So you will enable that feature on every cluster where you maybe got VDI or just remote desktop services. you will be then allowed to enforce that through the distributed firewall on the source level. So all the people that will just connect to a VDI environment need to be authenticated, and they will be checked through your just Active Directory. So they will be only allowed to access if they are granted by your firewall. Otherwise, the connection will be just not allowed. This will work on a session-based, and it's really give you the total control over maybe VMs that otherwise you cannot easily secure because the IP address change because of floating desktop or whatever. So this is the just best functionalities to secure your remote desktop. And it's the only way to just ensure that your VDI maybe it's really safe. So next slide as just a recap. That was just so again, that's integrated with Active Directory or LDAP provider. The use case, it's mainly VDI and remote desktop services. So that will be integrated with all the VDI features. So mainly with Horizon, that's perfect to protect all your workload, or external just VDI provider. And it need for sure that your VMs got the tools installed, because otherwise the distributed firewall will not be able to speak with your VMs, and that will not allow it to work properly. So if you're just using a VDI environment, that will be really a good use case and something that maybe you must evaluate. So next slide, please. So let's start to talk about the NSXIDS and IPS. So looking to the next gen firewall, the distributed firewall, it's absolutely one of the best features that we got, but it's really important to ensure that your system is safe against the latest threat. So we know that there are a lot of ransomware that are actually just going to eat your environment a lot of times. And with this kind of protection, we will be able to ensure the protection of your system. So the IPS and IDS system that could be enabled at cluster level on your SDDC will allow you to control everything. So you can just go ahead with the animation, please. So this layer will be embedded into your system. So we know that one of the way to achieve in the past IPS and IDS was sending the traffic out to other provider, but that was not the best way. So now you can leverage all the NSX full feature. So NSX will automatically update all the signature with just the most secure ones. So it will automatically ensure that the latest signature are updated and applied to all your workload. Then you can leverage the distributed firewall to ensure that all your VMs are safe. So that is one of the best way to just use that. Again, you can choose if you use only IDS or IPS. You can also choose all the customization. So that is actually one of the features that a lot of customers have asked. So if you can move forward, please, with the animation at the end. That's so. Also, look into the false positive. Actually, again, with latest signature, everything is safe. So that's fine. So next, so we can go just at the end of the animation. That will be great. Okay. So again, all the policy will be are not longer redundant. So you will not have to create multiple policies. They are distributed across all the VMs. If you move VMs or whatever, the policy will be automatically updated. And also they will be able to contextualize all the policies. So again, IPS and IDS now are part of the solution. You do no longer need any third-party apps or send out the traffic outside of your SDDC. And this is the best way, again, to protect everything. We can move to the next slide, the recap one, please. So that's totally integrated with the NSX Threat Intelligence Cloud Services. So we are using our NSX cloud services to upgrade all the signature. So this will allow you to just do not need to add other third-party signatures or to update nothing manually. and there is a huge amount of default signature already configured. So you can just add more if needed, but by default, everything is ready to be deployed, and it's a matter of just a few clicks to be just applied to all your workloads. So try that, and you will find that it's really working properly. Let's move forward with the FQDN configuration. So a lot of time we need also to ensure that we are able only to reach several services that are maybe external, and to ensure that everything is safe. And when the VMs is maybe moved, cloned, or maybe we are just moving across a cluster, it will always be compliance with this kind of rules. So when using external cloud services, that will be a little bit harder, because you cannot just add IP addresses or whatever. You need to just maybe ensure that some VMs are able to reach Windows Update. Think about your update services, that update server that need to just reach the repository from Microsoft, but other VMs need to be not allowed on reaching that. So that will be just one of the use cases, or just only few VMs need to reach external cloud provider. Again, some user need to reach their SharePoint website to publish content, other are not allowed. So in that case, we are actually finally proposing just the FQDN filtering to ensure that only few VMs or only few selected user are able to reach the website or the external cloud provider that they are entitled to access. Again, all these features, like previously with the IPS and IDS, will be enforced to the distributed firewall. So if you're actually just using the gateway firewall, please start thinking about using the distributed firewall. As Zach mentioned, with the distributed firewall, you will leverage more functionalities. You will have microsegmentation, and the DFW, it's part of the solution. So IPS, IDS, identity, and FQDN, it's an add-on, but the DFW, it's just part of the solution. You're not paying for that. You already own that. So evaluate to just avoid using just the gateway firewall and using the DFW. In that case, it will be easy to just swap to the latest advanced feature. So this will allow you to just use also the FQDN. Again, the most common use cases are just to secure the VMs or the user that are allowed to reach several external services. So other native cloud, other just services from from Microsoft, like Windows Update, SharePoint, whatever. So, and this will applied also when your VMs move across host or also on different clusters if they're all enabled. So those are the latest features. I don't know if any one of you got any question for the advanced firewall part, or any question about the things that were covered by Zach. So again, this is just an easy introduction. Feel free to reach us for any details if you want to go on deep dive. If you need more details, we can just give you all the insight about those features.
Yep. So as Bobby mentioned, let us know anything you'd like to hear about this session, or anything in the future you want to cover as well. And I think the next slide's the questions. Yep, there we go. All right, any questions? Put them in the Q&A. We just popped up the feedback poll. So that would help us out by filling that out. Let us know how we did. So Fabio, I had a question. I don't know if for the advanced firewall, can you how does that enable? Is that enabled on the whole SDDC, or can you enable that per cluster?
Yeah, that's a great question. So actually, you can enable on a cluster level. So when you just first of all, you have to enable the add-on, and then for every single feature, you can choose on which cluster that will be enabled. So you can just choose to have the IPS or IDS on a single cluster on your whole SDDC. You cannot just choose a single host because that will never work, because your VMs could be moved across all the hosts on a single cluster. So otherwise they will not be protected. But you can choose maybe, we got customers that they leave the first cluster only for the management VMs. So for the vCenter, NSX, and HCX, and the workload are placed on other cluster. In that case, they can just skip maybe to add the first cluster with I don't know, identity firewall that is not needed, and add that only on the cluster where they got some VDI environment working on. And that's the same for all the other features. Yeah.
And so for the advanced firewall features, that what is it is an additional cost, and that has the IDS, IPS, the identity firewall, and the FQDN filtering is all included.
Yep, they're all included, okay. And they're paid based on the host type. So the price, it's different, like for the deployment. So when you are deploying i3, you got cost. If you are deploying i3EN, that's a little bit different. That's because in the end, it's based on the core count. So more core, and yeah, the price will change. But all the prices are just public. So on our VMC page from the VMware.com, it's possible to see the street price again. But if you would like to have more details about the price, reach your sales representative and we'll give you all the details on that.
And just to clarify once again, I think you mentioned this, but the distributed firewall is included in the platform by default, so you don't have to pay to use that. It's included, and you can use that immediately. So
yeah. And then please use the distributed firewall because that's working properly. So don't use just the gateway firewall. So you all have distributed firewall included into the VMC solution. So it's only the IPS, IDS, identity, and FQDN that are out of the bundle, but the distributed, it's included. And why you're not using that? You're just using the gateway one. Okay. I think that near the end, so yeah.
Yeah, we don't see any other questions, so I guess we can wrap it up. If you want to go ahead a couple slides, I think there's our
contact here.
Yes, there's additional resources here, and this deck will be sent out, I believe. If you can go to the next. And here's our information if you have any follow-up questions. This session will be posted on YouTube as well. But yeah, feel free to reach out for any follow-ups.
Absolutely. Feel free to reach us, drop us an email if you would like to have more details. So to reach your assigned CSA and CSM if you got one.
All right. So we can wrap it up, and we'll see you on the next one.